In disaster situations, I have personally been present in 911 call centers and law enforcement facilities where the lines have just been literally covered up, 911 operators backed up with calls, people calling for help of all kinds. Many times they have a legitimate call for service, a real emergency need, but many times these people are calling for help because they simply didn't prepare for the disaster at hand. They didn't have water, they didn't have food, they didn't have first aid supplies, they didn't have flashlights and radios and backup batteries and extra medication, and they're calling the first responders for help with things that they should have taken responsibility for and prepared for themselves. So what this has done, this has caused law enforcement officers to have to pull off emergency cars where people, emergency calls, where people might be stranded in vehicles and almost drowning or on rooftops ready to be rescued, to have to deal with the smaller matters of these disasters. And I say they're smaller matters because they shouldn't be major aspects for law enforcement to have to deal with. These are things that we as individuals that live in our workaday world that should have prepared for, but what happens is in a disaster, people are sometimes losing life and limb or being threatened by loss of life and limb because police are being called to these small situations where people fail to prepare, and people are waiting for the police, they're waiting for the government to come along and bring them the things that they need to survive, when all they had to do over a period of a few days or a few weeks is begin to stockpile water and non-perishable food and flashlights and radios with backup batteries and extra medications. And here what we're doing, police are faced with a real dilemma. Do they make the rescue calls that they and first responders need to make, or do they run to someone's house that needs water, that needs food, that should have had these things all along? And it really creates a major backup in calls for service when there's a disaster or an emergency of some kind.